Hello and good afternoon to the last day of the candidate Q&A. Today we've got the Democracy in Campaigns candidates for the student elections of 2023. I'm AJ, I'm a student council chair and I'll be hosting tonight. So before we let the candidates introduce themselves, it's important to know we're joined by Maisie today, but one of the candidates couldn't attend, so I'll be reading his answers to the preset questions for him. After this, we will give the chance to anyone watching or anyone present here to ask any questions to the candidates. We will try our best, of course, to get to as many questions as possible. If we do not, remember, if you do have any further questions, you can still ask them or meet the candidates at Elections Fair next Wednesday. Each candidate will have a minute and a half to answer any question thrown at them. If you'd like to view the candidates' manifestos, you can do so on our website at upsu.net/elections. And I'd like to remind everyone that voting starts on the 20th of March at 9 AM, and once you have watched all the Q&A sessions, concluding today, you should be able to be informed enough to cast your vote next week. It's a really good opportunity to be involved who represents you next year. So let's get started with introductions. Let's start off with Maisie.
Hello. Hello, my name is Maisie Anir. I'm a final year business and human resource management student. In terms of my experience with the union, I currently volunteer as the chair of groups exec, meaning I oversee all the student groups that fall under the union, and I'm also the only student trustee to sit on the board at current. I'm also the Vice President of SURF and the course rep for Business and Law. So in terms of why I applied for this role, from volunteering and working with students of all different faculties, cultures and backgrounds for the last 2 years, I've managed to establish a lot of the issues that are currently facing students, and I formed my manifesto based on this. So the first point that I'm running for is living without limits, and this is cost of living support for students. So this involves updating the hardship fund process and policy, food vouchers for supermarkets, and utility bill top-ups for students that are on meters, as well as a red box period poverty scheme to be made available across all UPSU and MyPort hubs. The second point is called No Fuss on the Bus, and this entails making the university bus 24-hour service with an enhanced route. The bus route at the moment doesn't actually take into account where students are living, so the bus route needs it needs to be re-evaluated where students are actually living so that the route can be based around this and ensure that people don't have as far to walk afterwards. And it also promotes nighttime safety of students as well. My final point is called Home Away from Home, and this is increased housing support and signposting for international students. International students account for 1 in 5 people studying at Portsmouth, so why is policy not taking them into account? So by working with UOP Global, the student housing team and student finance, I want to ensure that everyone who comes to Portsmouth has somewhere to stay and knows where to go for advice. So that's me, passing over to AJ.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And I'll introduce Anwar and his written response. Throughout my life, I have been a passionate campaigner and activist. I have represented students since I was 13 and still representing them now as the Humanities Social Science faculty rep. I feel I have what it takes to be the next democracy and campaigning officer, and my 3 points are to continue the work on bringing back the student bar, also campaign on improving university deadlines so that not all assignments fall on the same deadline. Lastly, to campaign on trying to make the university a guarantor for university accommodation for people who don't have a guarantor. So now that both of the candidates have been introduced, we will move on to our first segment of the preset questions. The candidates have received these questions previously to allow them time to prepare. And the first question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge faced by students at the moment? Lindsay.
So from my experience and experience with a lot of people that I've worked with, spoken to, and friends with, been in contact with, it's definitely cost of living. Like 1 in 4 students are regularly going without food and basic necessities at the moment just because they can't afford them. And 58% of people have said that their student loan is not covering their basic living costs. So as I said, the current cutting through policy for the hardship fund is not fit for purpose, meaning many people are daunted by actually applying for the additional funding that they need in order to afford what they afford to live. Sorry, I can't speak today. So my manifesto seeks an easier process for this funding and the option to have funding for food and meter top-ups while you're waiting for this to go through, because some people at the moment are waiting 3 weeks for their hardship fund application to actually come through into their account, and this just isn't feasible, it's too long. So, as well as this, I want to introduce the Red Box Period Poverty Scheme across all my Port Hubs and UPSU sites, as I said. 1 in 3 girls under 21 in the UK have struggled to afford sanitary products. This shouldn't be the case. It should be free and easy to access for anyone that needs it. So by reinstating the scheme, it will be easier than ever for anyone to be able to receive the support that they need.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And on to Anwar's response. The biggest challenge faced by students at the moment is financial and course-related stress. Many students feel forgotten about, and a university must take action to support their needs. A way to help students out is to campaign against any price hikes to student halls where first-year students are disadvantaged. I will campaign for the university to expand a resource and provide free printing during assessment periods. Lastly, I will encourage the university to reassess deadlines to avoid students having multiple assessments due in the same week so students aren't overwhelmed. And that concludes the first question. So, the next question being, how do you think equality, diversity, and inclusivity considerations impact University of Portsmouth students? Maisie.
So EDI is crucial to ensuring that everyone that studies, not just at Portsmouth, but across the board, feels supported, valued and represented in everything that they do. So my Home Away from Home campaign seeks to gain more representation for this currently underrepresented demographic. So there's already some great services in place through the university. For example, rent guarantor scheme for making the university able to be a guarantor for those that don't have one is already in place. There's all housing support, are happy to read through people's tenancy agreements. There's a 24/7 emergency welfare support line for those that need help, and there are regular Res Life events. Nobody knows that these are happening. People are not made aware that these events are happening and that these services are available to them. So just by approaching students rather than waiting for them to scroll through a 15-page website trying to find the right thing and the right support, by approaching them, let them know what's available, you can let everyone know what is there and how we are able to help them out. So aside from housing, we've also got PGM ambassadors through the university as well, who work with student groups and the university. So they're there to seek, listen and act upon feedback that are given to them, and also help ensure about what I said earlier about everyone feeling included and represented.
Brilliant, thank you very much for your response. And Anwar's response. In my experience, as someone who has dyslexia, more needs to be done to support people like me. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed, and I feel like the university needs to understand my learning difficulties. I consider it inappropriate for the university to penalise people with learning disabilities for a minimum amount of spelling and grammar mistakes. Furthermore, I also want the university to promote ASDAC, or ASDAC, more than it does now, since they have been a massive help to me. Secondly, to make the university a more diverse place, more events should be organised, such as Afro-Caribbean Culture Night, a Japanese Culture Night, and an Indian Culture Night, so people from different cultures can come together and experience other cultures. Furthermore, I advocate for decolonising the curriculum to ensure that history is accurately portrayed. Brilliant. Moving on to our third question. What one thing would you most like to achieve or change if you were elected as a Democracy and Campaigns Officer?
That is a really good question. All my manifesto points that I've given all bear equal importance to me. I think they all have the potential to benefit a wide range of students in different ways. But aside from my manifesto points, I want to ensure that every student that comes to Portsmouth has a voice and make sure that everyone feels like they're represented in their time here. So UPSU are currently undergoing their annual democracy review, which happens every single year. So if elected, I want to use the information gathered from this to reform the democratic process and create different ways of feeding information back. At the moment we have got some tools, but they're not greatly signposted, and people feel daunted in shooting an email because they don't know if it's going to the right person, going to see people aren't sure. So changing this democratic process, making sure people know how they can get involved, what's available to them, and how they can help make change. But going back to my manifesto, as I said, it's very, very difficult to prioritise, but one thing that I would love to see happen, it was campaigned for last year, but unfortunately the cost of living has cropped up and it has led focus onto that instead. However, I would love to see the university bus made 24 hours because work has begun on this, but that hasn't been completed or followed through. But yeah, I would love to see that happen, as it also will contribute to cost of living as well, because lots of students at the moment are forking out lots of money on taxis and Ubers on nights out, and we can help save everyone a few pennies.
Fantastic, thank you very much for your response, Maisie. And on to Anwar's response. My number one priority is to turn the union building into a lively place that is central to students' lives. That is why one of my many manifesto points is to campaign to bring back the bar BBB. A student-run bar would create jobs for students and provide a fun space for society get-togethers. The union building should host more events throughout the year to create opportunities for like-minded people to socialise. A bar could allow for open mic nights, comedy nights and quiz nights, which would make the union an exciting place. Alternatives to the bar should also be explored. There is a lot of wasted space in the union building, which should be repurposed to hold events to bring students together. Games nights all could be fun, sober alternatives to the bar to ensure all students can benefit from a thriving union building. Brilliant, and on to our final preset question. How do you plan to get involved with wider student campaigns that are taking place regionally or nationally?
Okay, so from working with Groups Exec for the last 2 years, it also has meant that I have had an involvement with the current elected officer team. So from doing this, I know that the current elected officers team do have very, very good connections with the local student unions, and they do plan regular catch-ups and meetings to find out what is going on, see if there are any shared issues, and to create solutions together. So I'd like to see what's taking place. By using these connections, common issues can be collaborated on to create larger movements which can lead to national change. I also plan on continuing the work which is currently being completed by Dom, who is the current Democracy and Campaigns Officer. So in his time, he's made some incredible changes which has changed law and policy through to councils. So for example, he changed Portsmouth City Council's housing policy associated with student landlords. And he also spoke in a UK uni student accommodation panel with vice-chancellors across the country for different universities. So in summary, I want to put my campaigns across the sorry, it's one of those days. I want to put my campaigns across the local student union to see if there are any common issues that we can change together, and also continue work that is currently being completed in order to make meaningful change for all students.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And finally, Anwar's response. With the severity of the cost of living crisis, I have closely followed campaigns to freeze rents and improve the quality of student accommodation. Private landlords and companies such as Unite Students should not be taking a large chunk out of our loans without leaving us without money for enjoying food or social life. I will bring campaigns to Portsmouth to keep rents from rising while preventing landlords from decreasing housing quality to save their money at the expense of students' well-being. The most important campaign for me is to fight against spiking and trying to make university a safe place for all students. Bringing back the bar will allow for a more easily monitored night out where there are more anti-spiking measures in place. I will also encourage clubs around Portsmouth to implement more measures to keep people safe on nights out by having more staff available for safety and providing anti-spiking cups. I will use my position to mobilise students to campaign together for change if clubs do not live up to standards that should be expected in terms of student safety. And that concludes the preset segment of today. Now, moving on to our second part of this afternoon, questions from the audience. So, does anyone have any questions?
My question would have gone to Anwar, but he was not here. It's about the bar. As the current Democracy and Campaigns Officer, Thomas is working on the bar. I have tried in my capacity as development officer to actually help in terms of that too. What was the strategy around that? That would have been my question, but at least because he's not here, I can ask that question. Could that question be put to him, please?
I will send over any extra questions to Amber by email on Monday.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to remind everyone they can meet all the candidates at the elections fair next Wednesday. Do we have any more questions from the audience members? Do we have any on? Oh, we've got a question.
I mean, my question is also for Anwar, so if it can be please sent out. Considering that the colonizing curriculum is currently already happening because of BGM ambassadors, and that he as current faculty representative already knows that bar isn't coming back, and that university is already a guarantor for student housing, how is any of his manifesto points actually relevant? Thank you.
Thank you very much. All of these will be noted down and we'll see them. Do we have any more? A submitted question online.
It's just a question for me, not online. What do you think there's anything in your manifesto that you're not going to be able to complete, and what are you going to do to make sure it's completed in the future?
So the biggest thing that's going to be difficult to implement is going to be the 24-hour bus. It is going to be an upward struggle in terms of funding. However, I have actually completed a 4-step plan with dates and where money could potentially be utilised from in order to make this happen. So the union currently has some unutilised funding in the form of a development grant that gets left over at the end of the year. This is something that could be potentially put towards start-up costs for this, as well as liaising with the university to see if we can secure another deal and see if they also have unutilised funds as well that are from any funds that are being spent in the wrong areas, basically, in order to help fund this. In terms of everything else in my manifesto, I think everything else is very, very feasible. A lot of it's increasing signposting and support. Cost of living support, a lot of it is already in the works with the union, so it'll be, if I come into office, getting it finished off basically and getting everything finalised and put in place.
Brilliant, thank you. Do we have any more questions or any online questions? No. Well, in that case, thank you very much for joining us today. That concludes this afternoon's Q&A session. I would like to remind everyone, if we do have any questions that do pop up, or anyone watching at home, please submit them. The candidates will get to see them and answer them. And like I said before, there is the elections fair next Wednesday, so please come along to speak to all the candidates about the manifesto points or anything you'd like. And once again, I would like to remind you that voting is taking place next week and starts 9 AM on Monday, the 20th of March, and it closes 1 PM on Friday, the 24th of March. There are lots of prizes up for grabs if you take part in voting, and it's an amazing opportunity to have your say in who represents you next year. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Maisie.